Hi, I'm Pastor Frida, pastor of SEMA Memorial and chaplain of Passivant Community. We're going to talk about Abram and Sarai. Now, Abram was a righteous man, and God called him and said, Abram, pick up everything and move to this new land. Well, think about moving. They didn't have moving companies or moving trucks. They had to pack everything up, put it on a donkey or a camel, and walk. They didn't even have a car to drive. And they're going to a place they don't know. But Abram followed where God was calling him. God promised Abram that he would have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky or as many as the grains of sand on a beach. Now, that means a whole lot. The only problem was, Abram was about 100 years old, and his wife Sarai was 90. So God tells Abram, your wife is going to have a child. Well, you can imagine Abram's reaction. What? And one day, these men came to Abram and Sarai's house, and they said to Abram, your wife Sarai is going to have a child. Sarah was listening inside the tent, and when she heard this, she laughed. The men said to Abram, why did Sarah laugh? And Sarai said, I didn't laugh. And they said, yes, you did laugh. We'll be back in a year, and then we'll see what happens. Well, when God makes a promise, God keeps that promise. And sure enough, Sarai became pregnant, and God changed their names from Abram to Abraham and Sarai to Sarah. And Sarah gave birth to a son, and they named him Isaac. And I kind of think this is partly God's sense of humor, because the name Isaac means laughter. So, as I said, Abraham was 100, Sarah was 90, and she gave birth to Isaac. And Isaac grew up, and God tested Abraham's faith. And God said to Abraham, take your son, your only son, and go up, and you are going to sacrifice your son. So Abram gets Isaac and a few servants, and they travel. And before they get to the place where they are going to make the sacrifice, Abram says to his slaves, you stay here. Isaac and I are going to go. I'll be back later. So they go, and they have everything for the sacrifice, except one thing, the animal. So Isaac asks his father, pretty much, what's going on? And Abraham binds his son, he's ready to sacrifice his son. And as he's about to do that, God stops him and says, do not harm the boy. I know now that you are faithful. And over in the bushes, there was a ram caught. And they took that ram, and that ram became the sacrifice. Now, I can't imagine how Abraham felt. First of all, as he's about to sacrifice his son, how afraid and heartbroken he would have been, and also how excited and thankful he was when God stopped him and his son was safe. So you can imagine how Abraham felt. How do you think Isaac might have felt? Dad, what's going on? What are you doing? And then how relieved he was when Abraham stopped and he was safe. I also think about Sarah's reaction when they got back home, and maybe Isaac went in and said, "Mom, you're not going to believe what happened." I don't know that I would have wanted to be part of that conversation between Abraham and Sarah at that point. But God made a promise to Abraham about having descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the beach. And every time we see the stars or the sand, we remember that God is faithful to his promises. And as much as it may have been hard to believe God's promise, Abraham did have that faith, trusted God completely. Sometimes, and I'll speak to myself and maybe some of you as well, sometimes we might have a hard time believing God's promises, but yet we can always remember the story of Abraham and Sarah and how we know God is faithful to his promises, and God's promises are always kept, and we can trust and believe in that. Peace and blessings.